While I was signing the prenuptial agreement, I was slumped like a piece of human trash in Serafina Sterling's leather executive chair, focused entirely on a high-stakes mobile raid. Suddenly, her one that got away, the Golden Boy X, kicked the door in. "Is this loser really the man the CEO of Sterling Global is marrying?" He spat. I didn't even look up from my phone, but I started wrapping my fist in the sleeve of my cheap, off-the-rack blazer. "Miss Sterling," I said, "I might need to submit an over-budget expense report for my wardrobe today." 3 days later, the Wall Street Journal's digital headline read, "Thornair hospitalized in late-night incident. Assault by romantic rival suspected." Honestly, sitting here staring at a piece of legal paper with a grin that could rival a sunflower is purely a matter of professional ethics. The client is God, and when God tells you to smile, you make sure it's a goddamn ray of sunshine. "Mr. Vance, if you could look here, Clause 8, supplementary terms." Across from me, the lawyer pushed his gold-rimmed spectacles up the bridge of his nose. His voice was a flat, emotionless drone, trying to pierce through the frantic gunfire and explosions blaring from my game. Yeah, sounds great, totally fine," I mutter, my eyes glued to the screen as I unleashed a barrage of fire. "Left. There's a camper in the bushes on the left." I responded with zero sincerity. Behind the massive mahogany desk, my client and brand-new employer wife, Serafina Sterling, was twirling an expensive fountain pen between her fingers. She glanced at me with the kind of cold, detached gaze usually reserved for a used tissue she was debating whether to throw in the trash or incinerate. The only sounds in the office were the screams of my teammates in my headset and my occasional, dismissive or no problem. "Mr. Vance." The lawyer's tone jumped exactly 0.1 decibels, conveying his mounting irritation and the wounded pride of being ignored. He was trying to regain control over the negotiation of my bill of sale for the foreseeable future. Right then, crash! The heavy, bulletproof mahogany door was kicked open with the kind of theatrical aggression usually reserved for the alpha male lead in a soap opera. The door slammed against the wall with a thunderous bang, making the abstract paintings on the wall shudder. My thumb slipped. My character took a sniper round to the head. The screen went gray. TCH. My teammates were definitely going to be wishing death upon my entire family tree in the global chat. A man stood in the doorway. One look at his outfit told me it cost more than I'd earned in 5 years of odd jobs. Deep charcoal bespoke suit, hairstyled with enough gel to serve as a lethal weapon. It definitely had the high school heartthrob face, though the way he looked at the world through his nostrils ruined the aesthetic a bit. Julian Thorne, Serafina's infamous ex-boyfriend. Rumor had it he was the brilliant, charming upperclassman from her Ivy League days, the epitome of the gentle, talented scholar. As the story goes, he was forced by family pressure to sacrifice their love and move to London to broaden his horizons. Now, he'd returned in glory as the heir apparent to Thorne Industries. A classic setup that could fuel 50 episodes of a primetime drama. Right now, this charming scholar was glaring at me with eyes like poison-tipped daggers. He scanned me from head to toe, his gaze thick with a condescension so visceral it practically dripped onto the floor. He let out a scoff that vibrated with pure, marrow-deep contempt. It wasn't loud, but in the sudden silence of the office, it sounded like a gunshot. "Miss Sterling," he began, finally deigning to look away from me. He turned towards Serafina, his expression softening instantly into something like a thawing lake in spring. His eyes turned so gooey you could practically see the sugar strands. "I heard you recently signed a prenuptial agreement." He lingered on those words, then turned back to me, his lips curling into a smile so perfect it was obviously fake. "And you're the loser who's lucky enough to be my temporary placeholder." I, Leo Vance, Serafina Sterling's freshly minted contract husband, had been holding this glittering but hollow title for exactly 2.5 days. Our great CEO, Sterling, had slapped a prenup longer than my life expectancy in front of me the day before the wedding, calling it a mutual protection of interests. My expression at the time was probably more complex than someone being forced to swallow a live hornet. Honestly, whether I signed it or not didn't matter much. The only difference was how many zeros would be added to my postmortem debt. I was a lone wolf whose credit card balances were currently orbiting the far side of the moon. Serafina had a massive empire. Why would she care about my pocket change? It was probably just a capitalist's ingrained rigor, or a genuine fear that my contract brain might eventually try to sue for half her assets. I signed it. My signature was a wild, messy scrawl that screamed, "I've got nothing to lose," mostly because the string of zeros in the salary clause was incredibly seductive. After signing, I'd made myself at home in her massive, bed-sized luxury executive chair, intending to end this historic day with a thrilling 5v5 match. Now, facing Julian's loser assessment, I felt calm. I even felt like laughing. I was actually distracted by his suit. Damn, that fabric sheen, the hand-finished lapels, the subtle glint on the cuff buttons. Huntsman, or maybe Anderson and Shepard. That's a few dozen grand for a single suit. TCH, rich kids. Serafina, my client god and current contract wife, reacted with textbook indifference. She slowly set down her solid gold Mont Blanc, never once looking toward the door. Her icy gaze swept over me, her voice as flat as an AI assistant. Now, the door. Translation, go shut that noisy thing up. That attitude was more wounding than if she'd screamed in Julian's face. The gold-rimmed lawyer looked like a frozen robot, his face screaming, I didn't prep for this script. Julian's carefully curated, white moonlight face was visibly frosting over, and a tiny crack appeared in his fake smile. Me? I was unbothered. I actually wanted to give my boss a thumbs up. Judging by her reaction, Julian was just a bowl of spoiled, day-old leftovers. Nothing to worry about. I pushed off the plush armrests and stood up slowly, taking a moment to rub my hands against the leather, savoring the feel of top-tier calfskin. You got it, boss. Closing it now. I chirped the word boss with extra enthusiasm, flashing a 5-star concierge smile. I strolled toward the doorway where the radiating ball of resentment stood. Julian was clearly incited by my dead fish attitude. He took a predatory step forward, the scent of expensive cologne and cigar tobacco hitting me like a wave of unearned superiority. Close the door? You think you have a right. He practically hissed the words, his eyes burning with unmasked malice. A loser who couldn't even keep a job in Sterling's janitorial department. You're just trash she bought to perform for the media. Serafina, he snapped his head back toward her, his voice heavy with righteous indignation. What do you see in him? His sloppiness? His lack of ambition? Or the fact that his credit card debt is enough to fund a small predatory lending firm? Whoa, okay. His intel was solid. He even knew my credit card statements were practically public record. He'd clearly done his homework, hoping for a comeback. I stopped about 6 feet away from him. The golden boy filter shattered right then and there. Annoying? Yeah, he was annoying. What right did he have to bark at my person, even if she was just a client? More importantly, I hate it when people bring up my debts, even if they are a fact. Julian probably thought I was intimidated by his aura. The smirk of impending victory was almost uncontrollable on his face. Listen, I said, taking a soft breath. My professional fake smile evaporated, replaced by an expression somewhere between just woke up and being forced to eat a fly. First of all, how much I owe is none of your damn business. I looked at him, lazily raising one finger. Secondly, my other hand moved with lightning speed, unbuttoning my cheap, $700 blazer. You're polluting my ears. I pulled off the faded jacket and tilted my head towards Serafina. Miss Sterling, just a heads up. Today's clothing allowance, I said, slowly and methodically folding the cheap fabric, rolling it tight around my right fist until the cloth groaned under the tension, might need an over-budget reimbursement. I clearly saw a flicker of genuine surprise cross Serafina's normally unflappable, icy eyes. As for the lawyer, his glasses had slid to the tip of his nose, his mouth hanging open. Julian's expression? First, it was confusion as he watched me roll my sleeve. Wait, no. When he realized what a fist wrapped in a cheap blazer meant, his eyes switched from malice to shock and a hint of suppressed panic. Too late. Lastly, I took a sudden, explosive step forward, moving like a cheetah breaking out of slow motion. The wrapped fist was a blunt, unadorned instrument of force, carrying a raw, primal power that felt like it could bring down a wall. I aimed it straight at the center of that beautiful, arrogant face. I'm going to teach you a lesson on Miss Sterling's behalf about what the hell manners means. Thud. The sound was solid and heavy, like a lead pipe hitting a crate of wet sand. The scent of expensive cologne mixed with the metallic tang of blood as it exploded into the air. The word "you" was only halfway out of Julian Thorne's mouth when it was shoved back down his throat by an irresistible force. His entire body became a ragdoll struck by a high-speed semi-truck. His feet left the floor as he flew in a trajectory that defied physics, slamming, crash, into the heavy door he'd just kicked open. The door groaned in protest, nearly snapping back into its frame. Julian slid down the wood like a piece of overcooked linguine, collapsing onto the thick plush carpet in a heap. The only proof he was still alive was the strangled, broken whimper coming from his throat. His pristine hairstyle was ruined, Strands of hair matted to his forehead and his bloodied face. His nose was visibly skewed to one side, and blood was gushing like a broken faucet of cheap red wine, quickly spreading a scarlet map across the front of his bespoke white shirt. His hand shook violently as he tried to cover his face, his moans coming out in wheezing, airy gasps. The world went silent. The only sound in the office was Julian's heavy, ragged breathing, thick with pain and humiliation. The blazer-wrapped fist had successfully cushioned most of the impact on my hand, but my knuckles still hummed with a sharp, burning heat. I looked down at the former golden boy, now a crumpled dog, and felt nothing but a slight pang of regret for my clothes. Cheap or not, it was my only suit. I cracked my neck twice. I dropped the ruined blazer next to the pile of trash on the floor, returning property to its rightful place, a thoughtful second-hand service. Then, I turned around as if nothing had happened and walked back towards Serafina's desk, the symbol of money and power. My standard service sector smile was back in place. "Boss," I said brightly, my tone as light as if I just cleared a bit of clutter from the doorway. Doors closed. Noise pollution handled. Shall we finish the contract? Serafina, my client god, had eyes like a frozen pond that had just been struck by a stone, ripples of something I couldn't identify spreading across them. Her gaze flickered to the dying dog on the floor for a fraction of a second before locking onto me. Her fingers unconsciously twirled the gold Mont Blanc. Her face remained a mask, but her eyes were no longer pure ice. Instead, she was looking at me through the frozen topsoil, as if I were something new, something that needed a fresh valuation. That look, it made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. It was as if I hadn't just punched her ex, but had instead presented her with a rare artifact she was preparing to auction off. Pure capitalist appraisal. Make sure to include the medical expenses, she finally said. Her voice was the same eternal, cool tone, as if she were discussing a routine reimbursement for office supplies. Put on my tab. You got it, boss. You're the best. I beamed, the little calculator in my head clicking away. Does this mean the year-end bonus just doubled? 3 days later, I was lounging in my new home, a luxury penthouse downtown owned by Serafina, with a sofa larger than my entire old studio apartment. I was halfway through an apple when a local business news notification popped up on my phone. I stared, jaw-dropping. The headline was huge, bold, and reeked of tabloid sensationalism. Breaking: Thorn heir Julian Thorn hospitalized late night. Heavily injured by mysterious rival. Scandal rocks the elite. Below was a grainy photo taken at the back entrance of a private hospital under the cover of night. A few figures in white coats were pushing a gurney. You could see a cast on an arm, heavy bandages, and a face obscured by gauze that still held the outline of Julian's ruined, handsome face. The comments section was a war zone. Holy crap. Julian Thorn. Who's the beast that did this? Arrival. Don't speculate. Could be a car accident. Look at the leaked injury report. Multiple fractures and soft tissue trauma. Arrival. That's a blood feud. Wait. I remember Julian made a high-profile return a few days ago and pointed his finger at Sterling's contract husband. The plot thickens. Is the CEO's lapdog really that savage? Going full John Wick for love. Annual drama nominee. The bodyguard husband? Cough. Cough. I nearly choked on a piece of apple. Mysterious rival? Heavily injured? Multiple fractures? My blazer-wrapped punch was solid, and I'd heard the crack of his nose, but broken arms and legs. And rival? This narrative had spun so far off the rails, it didn't even recognize its own mother. A chill crawled from the soles of my feet to the top of my skull. I sat bolt upright, my back breaking out in a cold sweat. Damn it. I went too far. I'd hit Julian Thorn, the crown prince of the Thorn family. Serafina. She'd said she'd cover the medical bills. But who was going to pay for the loss of the Thorn family's face? Alistair Thorn, Julian's father, was the kind of man who could make half the city tremble by stomping his foot. Would he really let this go for a few medical bills? I remembered the look Serafina gave me at the end, that cold, calculative gaze. I am screwed. Serafina was a profit-driven capitalist. Even if the X was expired, the partnership with Thorn Industries was still a thing, right? To appease the Thorn family's wrath, tossing me, the troublemaker, out as a sacrificial lamb was the perfect solution. The optimal move. Man, I need to stay low before these capitalists play me. I had to run. My mind went into overdrive. The Darien Gap. High signal latency, poor reception, various factions in play. If I vanished into the jungle, even God wouldn't be able to find me. And I knew the territory well. Bank cards. Wait, I needed cash. All of it. Anything on Venmo or Apple Pay had to be wiped. No digital trails. An hour later, I was hauling a hiking pack stuffed with cash, instant noodles, and protein bars. Like a panicked gopher, I dived into the last economy flight to Miami. Miami was the gateway. I fled toward the borderlands of Honduras that night. After all, with the Thorn Air crippled, the family would definitely want my head on a pike. The air in the Honduran borderlands smelled like a rag soaked in diesel, mixed with the damp rot of the deep jungle and the occasional tang of cheap incense. I leaned against a rotting wooden window frame, chewing on my third pack of beef jerky that was 6 months past its expiration date, washing it down with a bottle of murky local moonshine. I stared out at the red mud road, turned into a swamp by the rain. My hiking pack, once heavy with cash, was now pathetically deflated in the corner, looking like a burst balloon of a get-rich-quick dream. In this hellhole, the local thugs who overcharged me for crappy biscuits were friendlier than the debt collectors back in New York. At least they rob you to your face, not behind your back. The wind carried a stronger scent of silt and a mix of sweat and high-end tobacco. My eyelid twitched. At the end of that mud road, a Land Rover, covered in red grime, but still sporting its luxury sheen, wheezed to a halt. The door slammed shut, and out stepped two long legs clad in bespoke trousers, definitely not suited for a jungle trek. Polished leather shoes sank unceremoniously into the mire. The newcomer had the face of a corporate elite, though his expression was as frozen as an ice cube. Behind his lenses, his eyes locked onto my shack with surgical precision. He ignored the warnings of the local guards, whose guns looked more reliable than the cash in my pocket, and pushed through a cluster of wet vines, walking straight to my drafty window. Mud splattered onto his expensive hems. He pushed up his gold-rimmed glasses. His voice was crisp and articulated, a perfect match for Serafina's refrigerator tone. "Mr. Vance, your escape route while hauling a bag of cash," he paused, "was very creative. The boss sent me to deliver 2 points." I clutched my glass, which was nearly slipping through my fingers. I didn't say a word. First, his elite face leaned closer to the window, his voice dropping to a whisper that made my hand shake. "That punch of yours triggered a fluctuation in Thorn Industries stock." The drop was exactly 3 times the minimum the boss was hoping for. The results were better than expected. A glint of something like a calculator's flash flickered behind his glasses. "The boss is very satisfied." It hit me like a bolt of lightning. Damn, that woman was aiming for the Thorn family's assets the whole time. Second, the corners of his mouth twitched up by exactly half a centimeter, a ghost of a smile. "We have to play the part to the end. Once everything is settled, on top of the original fee, your pay will be tripled." Triple. The number made me let out a loud, drunken hiccup. Reflexively, I glanced at the deflated pack in the corner. What I had left wouldn't even buy me a decent bed in this country. I rubbed my fingers together, feeling the grime. People die for wealth, birds die for food. The ancients were right. Who's paying the medical bills? I asked, leaning forward tentatively. The lawyer's smile remained steady as a rock. The boss's exact words: "The over-budget portion will be deducted from your triple bonus." Phoenix. I downed the rest of the moonshine in one go. It burned like I'd swallowed a hot coal. God, Serafina is still Serafina, calculating to the last cent, never losing out. 6 months was enough time for a titan to fall. The Thorn family's prestige, once held so high, had been chipped away by one wedge after another: insider trading, capital shortfalls, project failures. Sitting on the sofa of Serafina's luxury cage, eating chips and watching the financial news felt like watching a slow-motion building demolition. The liquidation gala was held right under the massive glass dome of the Thorn Industries headquarters. Once a place of high society mingling, it now felt like a ruin of fading glory, where even dignity was at risk. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume that couldn't quite mask the stench of decaying anxiety. Guests in tuxedos and gowns sipped champagne, whispering in low tones, their eyes scanning the room like vultures sensing a coming storm. I was wearing a suit sponsored by Serafina that cost more than my monthly salary, standing in a corner like a human coat hanger, trying to be invisible. I was holding a wrap filled with cheap caviar I'd swiped from a waiter's tray. A pig can't appreciate fine dining, I thought. I just needed something to fill the pit in my stomach. As I was fighting with a piece of salty caviar, a ripple of unnatural movement at the edge of the crowd caught my eye. It was like a red-hot iron being dropped into still water, a hiss, and then a spray of panicked ripples. Julian Thorn. His tuxedo was a mess, looking like it had been pulled from a dumpster. His golden boy mask was shattered into dust, leaving only a face etched with the desperation of a cornered animal. In his hand, he wasn't holding a champagne flute, but a paper cutter that glinted with a cold, metallic light. A few steps away, Serafina stood there in a shimmering couture gown that flowed around her like a cold crystal lotus. But pressed against the artery of her neck was the sharp tip of that blade. The whispers died instantly. The air turned to lead, filled with the tension of a lit fuse. Nobody move. Julian's voice was sharp and cracked, filled with a deathbed rasp. The money. Serafina, give back the diverted funds. Now, or else. He pressed the blade a fraction closer. A thin red line appeared on Serafina's pale skin. The silence in the hall was shattered. Screams erupted as the crowd scattered like a school of fish. A few bodyguards, finally waking up, reached for their holsters but were driven back by Julian's manic roar. Anyone moves, and she dies. I'll take her with me. Serafina, my client god, was caught between life and death. The moment the blade touched her neck and the blood trickled down, the calculator in my head started screaming. The triple bonus hasn't even hit my account yet. The deposit on this rented suit hasn't been returned. And most importantly, she still owes me the final payout. Damn it. I took a massive bite of the caviar wrap, stuffing my cheeks, and threw the greasy, half-eaten mess directly into the face of a trembling bodyguard nearby. While he was wiping his eyes, I lunged forward. Serafina's elite guards were frozen by Julian's sudden outburst, terrified to move while the knife was at their boss's throat. Me, the kept husband, and general loser? My charge wasn't professional at all. There were no flashy martial arts, just the raw, explosive instinct of a man who'd survived 1,000 street brawls. I moved like a bowling ball on an express lane, blasting past the muscle-bound guards who hadn't caught up with the situation. The wind of my passage knocked one of them off balance. Julian's scream was still echoing. Now, or else. He never finished the word. My left foot slammed into the floor, catching a fold in the carpet that snagged Julian's right ankle just as he was shifting his weight back. He lost his balance. As he instinctively tried to steady himself, the blade's pressure on Serafina's neck wavered for a split second. The opening, my hand, slick with grease and smelling of cheap caviar, shot out like a lightning bolt. I didn't go for the knife. I didn't try to grab Julian's wrist. He had training. A direct struggle for the blade might have slit her throat. My target was the high-value asset. My fingers, driven by a desperate greed, clamped onto the dark latch of the diamond-encrusted brooch pinned to Serafina's gown. Rip! It wasn't the sound of a latch opening. It was the sickening sound of high-end silk and velvet screaming as it was torn apart by brute force. The brooch, encrusted with mother-of-pearl and countless tiny diamonds, was ripped away from her chest, taking a chunk of the expensive fabric with it. The force of the pull yanked Serafina backward, sending her stumbling into the arms of a nearby guard. In the spray of mother-of-pearl fragments, the cold blade only left a shallow, white line across the air just below her collarbone. Julian was stunned by my robbery for half a heartbeat, his body lurching forward as Serafina fell back. Two guards slammed into him like human sandbags. Thud! The heavy sound of impact mixed with Julian's pained gasp. The paper cutter, his final desperate gambit, clattered onto the cold marble floor and slid away. The security team took over. The screams faded into terrified gasps. I didn't look at Julian, who was being pinned like a dead dog. I didn't look at Serafina, who was clutching her chest, surrounded by guards, her face as cold as ice. Her gorgeous gown was ruined, a jagged hole where the brooch had been. It gave her a strange, ragged beauty, but I wasn't in the mood to appreciate it. I was focused on my hand. The brooch was cold and jagged, the diamonds nearly cutting my skin. I used my greasy fingers to count the snapped threads and the torn velvet. God damn it, I'm in the hole, I whispered, my eyelid twitching. Serafina's limited edition gown was so intricately designed that the property damage would likely be deducted from my final payout. This was a net loss. In the chaos, I stuffed the brooch into my pocket. I had to return it to settle the damages and duck my head. Using the crowd as cover, I retreated toward the service exit. Mission accomplished. The play was over. The money should be landing soon. As for staying, no thanks. I was afraid Serafina would start calculating how many of my ribs she could write off as tool wear and tear. Half an hour later, I was standing outside the International Departures Gate, carrying a backpack and a bag of spicy snacks and instant coffee I'd bought at the airport. Real survival rations. The intercom was gently announcing the final call for a flight to a small Southeast Asian country. I pulled out my phone. The banking app showed a notification for a massive deposit. The final payment, including interest, not a cent missing. High efficiency. I shoved the phone into my pocket, feeling as light as if I'd just dropped the entire Sterling building off my shoulders. I turned to head for security, but a figure blocked my path. Serafina. She had changed out of the ruined gown into a low-key but high-quality cream-colored suit. Her hair was tied back perfectly, and the shallow mark on her neck was hidden behind an antique pin on her lace collar. Her eyes, deep and unreadable, scanned me like a high-precision airport scanner, from my backpack to my bag of snacks. In those few seconds, she was probably calculating my bone density, muscle ratio, and my projected health depreciation for the next 3 years. Her voice, despite the trauma and the cleanup, was still that same unshakable, cool tone, as if she were asking if I wanted sugar in my coffee. Is it settled? I nodded. Contract fulfilled. Mr. Thorne is in the care of the police. The money's arrived. Pleasure doing business, Miss Sterling. I forced a sincere, professional smile and hid the snacks behind my back. She didn't take the bait. She took half a step forward. Her aura was so intense that the passing travelers instinctively swerved around our little circle. Consider staying? She asked, her gaze pinning me like a nail. A different role. Head of security. Base salary is triple what you just made. No performance pressure. Year-end bonuses are negotiable. She paused, her lips twitching up in a rare, tiny curve. Supplementary clause. Full medical coverage, including a rib care package. Rib care package. My lower back and shoulder blades tightened instantly, as if I could already see the fine print in the contract. Workers' compensation covers. Bone fractures resulting from employers' reasonable estimation of tool usage. This woman was literally calculating the value of my bones. Damn, even if I played it like an amateur back there, she must have seen through it. No, wait, 6 months ago, she probably already knew. I should never have run to the border. What kind of sane person hides in a jungle? Sigh. Force of habit, I guess. A chill ran from my heels to my skull, scarier than being tracked by a swarm of mosquitoes in the rainforest. No, absolutely not. I shook my head like a maniac, backing away and nearly knocking over a lady with a suitcase. I squeezed into the security line. Miss Sterling, you're too kind. My little frame can't handle the crushing weight of your calculator. I'm not cut out for this kind of precision work. Hire someone else. Before she could respond, I dove into the flow of travelers like a slippery eel. I popped my head out from between two people and waved my boarding pass frantically. Goodbye, boss. I hope you find someone who fits your cost-benefit analysis. I didn't dare look at her again. I bolted through the security checkpoint. It wasn't until I threw myself into a hard plastic chair in the furthest corner of the lounge that I dared to breathe. The massive flight information screen flickered, the white light reflecting off the sweat on my brow. I buried my face in my hands. My ribs were still there. The money was still there. But that feeling of being scanned by a top-tier capitalist actuary, of every cell being tagged with a price, was burned into my marrow. Serafina Sterling. She was 10,000 times scarier than any jungle warlord. Those thugs just wanted your money. But her? She wanted every hair, every bone, every scrap of flesh to be fed in her never-ending commercial gears to squeeze out every drop of economic value. Even a bespoke suit looks like a debt collector's uniform on a bodyguard. I wasn't going back to that life. I just needed the cash. Now that I had it, what was left to worry about? The woman was smart, though. She knew how to let go. Otherwise, these 6 months would have been a waste, and if I got angry, well, I'd just end up back in some jungle shack again. But for now, everyone was happy. Story complete.